I want to begin with the anger, because it was real, and because most men who tell these stories have sanded it off by the time they speak, and I think that is a kind of lying. On the 12th of March 2023, I stood in the road outside a house I had paid 4,100,000 baht to build, in Krabi province, in the rain, with 2 bags, at 66 years old, and I was told by my wife of 6 years that the house was hers, the land was hers, the trees were hers, and that I should go back to France. Another man's motorbike was under the carport I had specified the dimensions of, and what I felt was not sadness. I want to be exact. It was a white, clean, total rage, of a kind I had not experienced since I was 19, and it lasted, at that intensity, for about 11 days, and during those 11 days, I wrote things I did not send, and planned things I did not do. My name is Elaine. I am 69 now. I am going to tell you what happened over the next 40 months, and the reason I am telling it is not the rage, it is that I won. Partially, expensively, slowly, and at a price I am still paying. But I won, in a Thai court, on paper, and I collected. And the whole thing turned on a habit that my wife's family had been laughing at me about, affectionately, for 6 years. I owe you the 11 days, because I opened this recording with them, and because a man who describes his own rage in one sentence, and then moves on to procedure, is hiding the most useful part. I stayed in a guest house in Ao Nang for 400 baht a night. I did not eat properly. I telephoned Kesine 11 times in the first 2 days, and she answered twice, and was, both times, entirely calm, which I found more unbearable than anything she said. On the 4th day I drove past the house twice, once in daylight, once at about 10 at night, when I sat in the car 80 meters up the road with the engine off for perhaps 40 minutes looking at a lit window. And I want to say to any man who has done that, or is doing it this week, you are not going mad. It is extremely common, and it is also the beginning of the road that ends with a deportation order, and the only thing that stopped me from going further was that I am a coward about scenes, which turns out to have been the most valuable character flaw I possess. On the 7th day I wrote the Facebook post. On the 9th I wrote a letter to Weera, which was 4 pages long, and which is the worst thing I have ever written, and which I still have, unsent, in the same box file as the notes, and I keep it for the same reason a doctor keeps a photograph of a wound. And on the 11th day the rage simply stopped, like a tap, in a 7-Eleven, at about 6 in the morning, while I was buying coffee. No realization, no decision, nothing dignified, and what replaced it was a flat gray exhaustion and one clear thought, which was, I have papers. I did not know what the papers were worth. I only knew that I was a man who had papers, and that this was the only fact in my life that week, which was not about my feelings, and I went back to the guest house and got the box file out from under the bed and put it on the table and looked at it. Everything in the next 40 months came from that morning. Not courage. Just the last piece of me that was still functioning, turning out to be the filing. That is the entire wrong, and I am not going to dwell on it, because the betrayal is the least interesting hour of this story, and every other channel will give you 40 minutes of it. Between 2017 and 2022, I paid for a plot of land in her name, a 3-bedroom house on that land, and 11 rai of rubber. She met a man called Weera in 2022. In March 2023, she asked me to leave, and under Thai law, as every one of you knows and as I knew perfectly well at the time, a foreigner cannot own land, and everything I had paid for stood in her name, legally, correctly, and without any fraud whatsoever. There was no forgery. There was no crime. She did not steal anything. She simply exercised, calmly and with counsel, a set of rights she genuinely held. That is the wrong. Now let me tell you about the receipts. I was a heating and ventilation engineer in Saint-Étienne for 31 years, the last 14 running my own firm with 4 employees. And if you want to understand this entire story, you have to understand my father, who was a foreman at Manu France, and who taught me, when I was perhaps 8 years old, that a man writes things down, not for suspicion, for clarity. He kept a carnet in his jacket, always, and in it he wrote what was agreed, with whom, on what date, and he made the other man read it. And this was not adversarial, it was simply how a serious person conducted himself. I inherited that completely. In my firm, I never once had a dispute with a client that lasted more than one meeting, because I could always produce the page. And when I moved to Thailand in 2015, at 58, with 190,000 euros and a plan to spend my remaining years somewhere warm, I brought the carnet with me, and I did not stop. And I want to be extremely clear about the next sentence, because it is the moral center of this recording. I was not being clever. I did not suspect her. I was not building a case. I was being what I have been since I was 8 years old, which is a man who writes things down. And if I had been a different man, a more relaxed man, a warmer man, the kind of man who trusts and does not record, I would have lost everything, and I would today be in a subsidized flat in Saint-Étienne, with nothing, and I would have deserved it no more and no less than I deserve what I have. The habit worked like this, and I want to describe it exactly, because it is the practical thing in this recording that might actually help somebody. Every time money moved, for the land, for a stage of construction, for the saplings, for the pickup, for her brother's operation, I wrote a note, half a page. The date, the amount in figures and words, what it was for, and one line stating that this was money lent by me to Kesini, repayable. In Thai on the left, written by her because my written Thai is poor, and in French on the right, written by me. And we both signed it, and I kept both copies in a box file, and, this is the part I need you to hear properly, it took 90 seconds and it was, for 6 years, a family joke. Suing, her daughter, who was 14 when I arrived and who I love, used to imitate me. The French accountant, she called me. Kesine would sign it laughing and hand it back and say, "Okay, Papa Alain, finish." There was one Sunday in 2019 when her brother, after his hospital business, signed his with a flourish, like a man signing a football contract. And everybody applauded, and I laughed too, because it was funny, and because I understood exactly how I appeared to them, and because I have never once in my life stopped doing something on the grounds that it was making people smile. 31 notes across 6 years. I did not know what they were. Nobody did. They were a personality trait until the 11th of April 2023, when a lawyer in Krabi Town read them and went quiet. Before the lawyer, the good years, because they were good, and because leaving them out would make this a colder story than it was. Kesini was 42 when we met in 2016, running a small restaurant near Ao Nang, divorced, sharp, extremely funny in a way that took me a year of language to appreciate. Her daughter Suing was 14 and hostile for about 5 months, and then, one afternoon, brought me a broken electric fan to fix and stood watching me do it, and that was that. For the next 7 years, I was the person she brought broken things to, and then the person she brought school problems to, and then, at 19, the person she rang from Bangkok at midnight about a boy. I paid for her university. That was never in any note, by the way, and it never occurred to me to write one, and I want you to sit with that distinction, because it is the difference between a man building a trap and a man being himself. I documented every baht that went to an adult about property, and not one baht that went to a child about her future. We built the house in stages between 2018 and 2020, and I was on that site every day, because a ventilation engineer cannot not be on a site, and the drainage on that house is the best drainage in the province, and I will die believing that. In the evenings we ate on the terrace. In 2021 we planted the rubber. I was, in those years, entirely happy, and I want that on the record before I describe what I did to get my money back. I should add the texture, because "we built a house" is 4 words for 2.5 years of a life. We chose the plot together in 2017. 11 rai, with an existing scrub of old trees, 40 minutes inland from Ao Nang, and Kesine found it through a cousin and negotiated it down by 200,000 baht in a conversation I did not follow one word of, and which I watched with something close to awe. I drew the house myself, on squared paper, over 4 evenings, and then paid a Thai architect 18,000 baht to make it legal and to tell me, gently, that a French drainage philosophy in a monsoon province needs revision. The build ran from March 2018 to November 2020, with a long stop in the middle when the contractor's father died. I was on that site perhaps 400 days. I learned Thai numbers there, and the words for level, plumb, and again please. The foreman, a man of about my age from Nakhon Si Thammarat, and I could not exchange a full sentence in either direction, and by the end of it we could work together for 6 hours, with about 9 words, and it was one of the more satisfying professional relationships of my life. On the day the roof went on, Kessini's whole family came, and there was a ceremony, and her mother, who is 80, and who has never in 9 years said one unkind thing to me, and who I have not seen since March 2023, tied a white string around my wrist, and said something long and warm that Nguyen translated as, roughly, "She says you work too much and the house is good." I wore that string until it fell off. That is what 4,100,000 baht bought, and I want anybody watching to understand that I am not describing an investment that went wrong. I am describing a home, built by a man who thought he had arrived at the end of his life's project, and the fact that I could later produce 31 signed pieces of paper about it does not make it less than that. It is possible. This is the thing I most want to say, and the thing hardest to say. It is entirely possible to keep a complete record of something and still be inside it up to your neck. The two are not opposites. My father knew that. It took me until 69. The 11th of April 2023, Krabi Town, the office of Kun Sopita, above a shop that sells motorcycle parts. She is perhaps 50, and she practices in a province where half her clients are farmers and half are foreigners, with exactly my face, and she gave me 90 minutes and destroyed my expectations in the first 11 of them. The land, gone. Not arguable, not contestable, gone. It was in Kessini's name. A foreigner cannot hold it. And she asked me a question then that I did not understand the importance of. Did I sign anything at the land office in 2017? I said I signed several things. She asked whether one of them had been in Thai only, quite short, presented near the end. And I remembered it, because I remember all documents, a single page, 3 lines, which the clerk had explained to me through Kessine as being standard confirmation. Kun Sopita told me what it was. In Thai land transfers where a foreign spouse's money is involved, the foreigner is routinely required to sign a declaration confirming that the funds are a gift and are the personal property of the Thai spouse, with no claim by the foreigner. It is not a trick. It is the legal architecture that makes the transaction possible at all, and every officer in every land office in this country processes them daily, and I had signed mine in 2017, in a good mood with my wife beside me. 1,700,000 baht for the land, extinguished by 3 lines I had signed myself. She let me sit with that for a moment, and then she said, "What about the construction money? And do you have anything at all?" I put the box file on her desk. She read for perhaps 20 minutes without speaking, which in a lawyer being paid by the hour, I have since learned is either very bad or very good. Then she said something I have thought about every week since. She said, "Whose idea was the wording?" And I said mine, and she asked when I had first written one, and I said 2017, before the land for a pickup truck, and she asked why, and I told her about my father and the carnet, and she put the file down and said, "Then you have a case for the house." Not the land, the house. Because a gift and a loan are different instruments, and 31 signed and dated bilateral acknowledgments stating money lent, repayable, signed by the recipient, are not affection or generosity or a marital transfer. They are evidence of a debt. 2,400,000 baht of construction money, documented note by note, stage by stage, foundations to roof to the drainage I am so proud of. She was completely honest with me in that first meeting about the odds, which is why I hired her. She said the notes would be attacked as informal, that Kessini's counsel would argue they were a domestic formality and not a contract, that the court might discount them, that it would take 2 years minimum, and that even winning is only half of the work. She said the sentence that governed the next 3 years of my life. Winning the paper and getting the money are two different jobs, and the second one is longer. We filed in August 2023. Here are the mechanics, because nobody publishes them, and every man in my position needs them. A civil claim in Thailand carries a court filing fee calculated as a percentage of the amount claimed. In my case, on 2.4 million baht plus interest, that came to just under 60,000 baht, payable at filing, before anything happens at all. Translation of 31 bilingual notes by a certified translator, 22,000. Kun Sopita's retainer and first phase fees, 90,000. So before a single hearing, before any Thai official had read one word of my case, I had spent 172,000 baht, about 4,500 euros, on the possibility of an outcome. That is the first thing that stops men. It stopped 4 men I have met since. You are already wounded. You are already poorer than you planned to be. And the system's first question is whether you would like to pay a substantial sum for a lottery ticket with a 2-year draw date. I paid it out of the remains of my capital, which stood at that point at about 1.1 million baht, and I moved into a room in Krabi town for 5,000 a month, to make the arithmetic work, and my French pension of 1,510 euros covered my living, and that was the shape of my life for the next 3 years. Then nothing happened for 4 months, and I need to talk about the silences, because the silences are the actual substance of a Thai legal case and nobody warns you. It is not drama. It is not cross-examination and objections. It is a man in a rented room checking his phone at 9 in the morning, and again at 2, and again at 6, for weeks, for a message that does not come, from a lawyer who is not ignoring him but who genuinely has nothing to report, because the file is somewhere in a building being processed by people with 400 other files. In the first silence I did 3 things, and 2 of them were mistakes. The first, I began going to the courthouse to look at the building, physically, 2 or 3 times a week, which achieved nothing except that a security guard came to know me and would nod, and I began to look forward to that nod, which is a sentence I would prefer not to have to say about myself at 66. The second, I started a document tracking Kesani's social media and Wira's, and I kept it for 11 weeks, and it was the worst 11 weeks of the entire 40 months. And I stopped only because Kun Sopita asked me, at a meeting, in a completely neutral voice, whether I was sleeping. The third thing, which was not a mistake, was that I began going to the free Thai class at the temple twice a week, out of nothing but the need to fill mornings. And I will come back to that, because it turned out to matter more than anything else I did. I should give her side, because it exists, and because a story where the other person has no case is usually a story being told by a liar. Kesani's counsel filed a defense that was, I have to say, entirely reasonable. Its position was this: the money was given by a husband to his wife during a marriage, for a family home in which he lived rent-free for 5 years. The notes were a private domestic habit of an eccentric foreigner, signed casually, never intended by either party as commercial contracts, and the very existence of the 2017 gift declaration proved the parties' true intention regarding property. That last point is genuinely strong. If the land money was a gift by his own signature, why would the house money be a loan? And I want to say clearly, I do not believe Kesani was lying when she instructed her lawyer that way. I believe she experienced those 6 years as a marriage in which a husband paid for a family home, because that is what it was, and I believe the notes really were, to her, my funny habit, right up until the moment they were read out to her by a professional. That is the strange heart of this case. She was not wrong about what those notes had meant. She was wrong about what they were. The first mediation was in March 2024, 7 months after filing, in a room at the provincial court with a ceiling fan and 8 plastic chairs and a mediator, a woman of about 60, who was patient and formal, and who addressed each of us in turn and never once raised her voice. Kesane arrived in a blue blouse I had bought her in Phuket in 2019. We did not speak. Her side offered 400,000 baht. in full and final settlement, payable over 2 years. Kun Sopita did not react at all. Afterward, in the corridor, she said that a first offer is information, not an insult, and that 400,000 told us they were frightened of the notes. I said no. I want to be honest about why I said no, because it was not strategy. It was that I had spent 172,000 baht and 7 months in my sleep, and 400,000 against 4.1 million felt less like money and more like a receipt for my own foolishness. And there is a version of this story where that pride costs me everything. Running total at that point, case value on paper 2.4 million plus interest. Cost to date 241,000 baht. Elapsed 8 months. Night slept properly. Few. In the spring of 2024, I nearly destroyed the whole thing, and this is the part I would most want a man in my position to hear. A friend of mine, Welsh, long-term, well-meaning, a good man, suggested over a beer that what I should really do is go to the village and speak to Kesani's mother in front of the neighbors, and let people know exactly what had been done, and put it on Facebook, in Thai and English, with the photographs of the house. I want you to understand how good that sounded. I had drafted the post already. It existed in my phone. I had written it in the 11 days of white rage in March 2023, and revised it perhaps 30 times since, and it was accurate, every word of it, and it named her, and it named him. I mentioned it to Kun Sopita at our next meeting, half joking, and she put down her pen, and she explained, in the flattest voice she had used with me in a year, what criminal defamation means in this country, that truth is not a complete defense, that it is a criminal matter and not merely civil, that a foreigner in a live civil case who publicly names his opponent hands the other side both a countersuit and a reason for the court to look at his character, and that she had seen exactly this in 2 cases she had worked on. Then she said, "You have 31 pieces of paper. Do you want them, or do you want the post?" I deleted it in her office, in front of her, and she watched me do it. That deletion is, I think, the single most profitable action of my life. It cost me nothing, and it preserved everything, and I have since met 2 men in Krabi and 1 in Phuket who did not delete theirs, and all 3 of them lost, and 1 of them was deported. The hearing where the notes were actually attacked took place in January 2025, and it is the only genuinely adversarial hour in this entire 40 months, and it was nothing like anything you have seen on television. There is no jury. There is no performance. There is a judge who has read the file, 2 lawyers, a clerk, a recording system, and a great deal of paper, and the questions come in a register so calm that it takes you a while to notice you are being taken apart. Their counsel, a courteous man in his 40s from Surat Thani, went at the notes exactly where Kun Sopita had predicted a year earlier. He asked whether I had ever demanded repayment during the marriage. No. He asked whether I had ever set a repayment date on any of the 31. No. He asked whether I had charged interest. No. He asked whether I had lived in the house free of any rent for 5 years. Yes. He asked whether it was not true that these papers were a private joke in the family, and here I have to report that he was, factually, entirely right, and I said so. I said yes, they laughed at them, and yes, they were signed laughing. And Kun Sopita had prepared me for exactly this, and her instruction had been 1 word: agree. Agree with everything true. Because his case required the notes to be affection, and every honest answer I gave made them look more like affection, and the case turned instead on the one thing his questions could not reach, which was the wording, in Kesani's hand, on 22 pages, chosen by her, after a gift declaration she had signed on the same land in the same summer. A document does not have to be solemn to be a document. That is the entire law of it as far as I understand it, and it took 2 lawyers and 18 months to establish, and I was not clever enough to have known it in advance. Then came the long silence, 6 months, from May to November 2024, and this is where most cases die, not in court, in the middle. There was 1 hearing postponed twice for reasons I never understood beyond a rotation of personnel. My money went below 800,000 baht. I got shingles in July, which the doctor said plainly was stress, and which is an 11-day education in what your body thinks of your legal strategy. And in September, Suing stopped replying to me. She had been replying, briefly, coolly but not cruelly, for over a year, and I understood entirely. She is her mother's daughter, and she was 22, and being asked to hold two things at once. And then in September she stopped, and I sent one message a month after that and did not receive answers. And I have to tell you honestly that during those months, I began to ask myself what exactly I was doing this for. That question is the real antagonist of a long case. Not the other side, not the system. It is the 6-month silence in which you sit in a rented room, having converted your entire life into a file number, and you cannot remember whether you are pursuing justice or simply refusing to accept a loss. And there is nobody to ask, because your lawyer bills by the hour, and everybody else is tired of hearing about it. There was a point, in early 2025, when I nearly ran out of the money required to finish getting my money back. And this deserves its own passage, because it is the trap inside the trap. By January, my capital was at 410,000 baht. The second phase legal fees, the enforcement petition that would follow a judgment, and the possibility of an appeal by the other side. Counsel costed it honestly for me on a sheet of paper, came to somewhere between 160 and 240,000. So a man who has already spent 240,000 baht and 20 months must decide, at the point of maximum exhaustion, whether to commit more than half of everything he has left to the last stretch of a case he still might lose. This is where the system does its real filtering, and it does not filter for merit. It filters for staying power. I have thought about this a great deal, and I want to say it carefully, because I do not think it is corruption, and I do not think it is designed. A civil system that runs on time and fees will always be easier for the party who is at home, working, with family money nearby, than for the party living alone in a rented room on a foreign pension. Kesani's brother could refinance. Nobody was going to refinance anything for me. In the end, I wrote to my daughter Camille in Lyon. The first time in my life I have asked either of my children for money, and she sent 8,000 euros within 4 days and refused to discuss terms. And that transfer is the only money in this entire story that has no note attached to it, in either direction, and there never will be one. I will add one more thing about that 6-month silence, because it contains the only practical advice I have about surviving the middle of a case. Around August 2024, Counsel told me something that changed how I lived. She said, "Stop waiting for the case." She said, "It is going to take what it takes, and you have already done your part, which was the paper, and there is now nothing in the world you can do to make the court move faster. And a man who checks his phone 40 times a day for 2 years will not have a case at the end of it. He will have a nervous illness with a case attached." So she gave me a rule and I followed it exactly, because following clear instructions is the thing I am best at. I was permitted to think about the case on Tuesdays. Tuesday morning I would read whatever there was, write down any question, send it, and then close the file until the following Tuesday. 6 days off, 1 day on. It sounds absurd and it worked. Not perfectly, and not immediately, but by October I was sleeping again, and I had joined the Thai class properly instead of drifting into it, and I had started swimming at the beach, at Ao Nam Mao in the mornings. Whether that discipline shortened the case by a single day, I have no idea. It is the reason I was a functioning human being at the end of it, instead of the man I met once in Krabi Town, who won his case in 2022, and who I would not describe as having survived it. The hinge came in November 2024, and it came out of the failure, which is the only reason I still believe in this system at all. Counsel associate, preparing for the resumed hearing, was building a chronology to defend the notes against the gift declaration argument, and she laid all 31 notes on a table in date order, something I had never done in 6 years, because to me they were a box, not a sequence, and she found what was, in retrospect, obvious. The Land Office Declaration was signed on the 14th of June 2017. 22 of my 31 notes were dated after it. The earliest post-declaration note was the 29th of August 2017, the first payment for foundations, and its Thai text, written in Kesane's own hand, contained a phrase which the certified translator rendered as, "to be returned to Elaine when able," written by her. 2 months after she and I had jointly declared to a government office that the land money was a gift, Kun Sopita's argument from that day was no longer that the notes were contracts. It was that the parties had demonstrably distinguished between the two categories themselves, in writing, in the wife's own hand, immediately after signing the gift declaration. The declaration stopped being the weapon against me and became the thing that proved I knew the difference. I have thought many times about how close that came to being missed. Not by a genius, by a young associate with a table big enough to lay out 31 pieces of paper in a row. Word of a case travels in a province like this one, and by mid-2025 men were finding me. Not many, 6, across a year, in Krabi and Ao Nang and once by email from Trang. And I want to describe them accurately because they are the reason this recording exists in the form it does. Of the 6, 4 had no documents at all. None. Not a transfer receipt, not a message, not a photograph of a bank slip. One of them had built a resort bungalow business worth 6 million baht and could not prove he had paid for a single roof tile. And there was nothing whatsoever I could offer him except a phone number and the truth, which is that his case does not exist as a legal object, no matter how true it is as a fact. That is the hardest sentence I have had to say to another human being. The 5th man had a strong position and could not fund it, and stopped at the filing fee, and went home to Belgium. The 6th had documents, funding, and a good lawyer, and he had also, 3 weeks after his separation, published everything on Facebook with her name and her photograph. And he spent the following 18 months defending a criminal defamation complaint instead of pursuing his claim, and he left the country under conditions I will not describe because they were his. So, 6 men, all wronged, all telling the truth, and the variables that separated us were not justice and not merit. They were paper, money, and silence. If you take one thing from this hour, and you are currently in a happy relationship in this country, with your money in somebody else's name, it is that all 3 of those are things you can arrange in advance, and only one of them is expensive. Judgment was the 18th of September 2025. 26 months after filing, in the provincial court, at 9:40 in the morning, in a room with maybe 14 people in it, and no drama of any kind. I want to describe 2 things about that morning. The first is that the court awarded 2,400,000 baht plus interest, a total of 2,760,000, and dismissed entirely my claim regarding the land, exactly as Kun Sopita had told me it would, on the 11th of April 2023, in her first 90 minutes, before she had taken 1 baht from me. The second thing is that I understood it, not through my lawyer, not through a translator. I sat in that room and I followed the judge's reading of the operative part in Thai, because of 2.5 years of free classes at a temple twice a week, that I had started only to fill the mornings of a 4-month silence. I understood perhaps 70%, and I checked the rest afterward, and it was correct. There was no elation. I want to be careful here, because men expect a moment. What I felt, sitting in a plastic chair at 9:40 in the morning, was something closer to a machine coming to rest. A very quiet, cold sensation of order restored, and underneath it, immediately, the awareness that Kesini was 11 meters away and had just lost 2.76 million baht, and that I had been at her daughter's graduation. Both things at 9:40 in the morning. Nobody tells you they arrive together. Then the second job, which is longer. A judgment is a piece of paper stating that somebody owes you money. It is not money. Enforcement in Thailand runs through the legal execution department, and it requires you to identify assets and to petition, and it costs more money, and it takes as long as it takes. Kesine's assets were the land, which was hers, and which the judgment did not touch, the house, which stood on it, and a restaurant business with almost nothing in it. Executing against the house means, in practice, forcing an auction of a house on land you cannot own, which produces a mess that serves nobody, and which Kun Sopita told me frankly would take another 2 years and might net 40%. So what actually happened is what actually happens in most of these cases, And what nobody films, after the judgment, her side came back to the table. Because now the number was not 400,000 offered by a confident defendant, it was 2.76 million owed by a losing one with a house at risk. We settled in enforcement in February 2026 for 1,900,000 baht. 1 million paid immediately from a refinance her brother arranged, and the balance over 18 months, secured, with default terms. I have received, as I record this, 1,280,000. The rest arrives monthly. It arrives on time, which I did not expect, and which I notice every single month. So here is the honest arithmetic, and I insist on giving it in full, because the absence of these numbers is why men either give up too early or fight far too long. I paid 4,100,000 baht into that property over 6 years. I recovered 1,900,000 on paper, of which 1,280,000 is in my hand today. Legal costs across 40 months, 340,000 baht, which includes filing, translation, both phases of fees, enforcement petition, and the travel. Net recovery against total loss, about 38%, and I will not see the last of it until late 2027. Time, 40 months, from the rain outside the carport to the last signature, which is to say a solid piece of the healthy years remaining, to a man of my age. And against that, the land, 1,700,000 baht, is gone forever, and was gone from the first 11 minutes of my first meeting, and no amount of anything would ever have changed that, because I signed 3 lines in 2017, in a good mood. And the price I actually paid was not on any invoice. In February of this year, 3 days after the settlement was signed, Suing sent me a message, the first in 17 months. It said, and I am translating it exactly, "I know it was your money. I know you were right. I don't know how to be with you now." That is not a cruelty. That is a 23-year-old woman being more honest than most adults manage, and it is the true bill for this case. I won a judgment against her mother in a public court in the province where she grew up. Both things are true. I was owed the money, and she cannot fix her own life around that fact. And she may manage it one day, and she may not. I have not replied yet. I have drafted 11 versions and deleted all of them, which those of you who have been listening carefully will recognize as the only skill this entire ordeal actually taught me. When people ask me whether it was worth it, and men ask me constantly, in Anong, at the market, at the Thai class, because word travels, I say yes, and then I say the true thing, which is that I did not do it for 1.9 million baht. I did it because on the 12th of March 2023 I was told, in effect, that 6 years of my work and my money were a story I had made up, and I am a man who writes things down, and I could not live in a world where the record said that. I wanted to be believed. The court believed me. Cost 340,000 baht and 40 months and a girl who brought me broken fans to fix. And that is the whole invoice, itemized, and I am not going to tell you what to conclude from it. I live in Ao Nang now, in 2 rooms above a dive shop, 8,000 baht a month. I still go to the Thai class, though now I am the one who explains things to the new ones. I keep the notes, all 31, returned by the court, in the same box file, and I have no idea why, and I am not going to examine it. And in October, for reasons connected to a friend's boat and not to anything in this story, I drove east on the road past the plot. It was about 6:30 in the morning, and there was mist coming off the trees, and the rubber was being tapped. The cups were on, the bark was cut properly. Somebody knows what they are doing. And 11 rai of trees I chose and paid for and planted in 2021 were standing there producing, in the early light, belonging entirely and lawfully to somebody else. I did not stop. I did not slow down very much. I got to the boat and the day was good, and I want to end on the honest version rather than the wise one. I do not feel at peace about those trees. I feel that they are hers, and that I built them, and that both of those sentences are permanently true, and that a man can carry that for the rest of his life without it ruining any particular morning. That is not healing. It is just the load, correctly labeled, in a box, in my own handwriting, which is, when I think about it, the only thing I have ever known how to do.